Hi, my name is Jacob.
And my name is Trent.
Today we are interviewing Ron Fanjoy.
He has lots of...
When you were really young, did you have any chores around the house?
Yes, the boys had to get the wood in. We had wood for heat back those days, and other chores around the yard and things like that, yes.
Did you have any parents or siblings?
Yes, parents? Yes, my father's name was Harry George Fanjoy. My mother's name was Hazel Moore Fanjoy, or London rather, I'm sorry. Yeah, London.
What were your siblings' names?
My children?
Siblings, like brothers, sisters?
Oh, my brothers and sisters was, Lillian was the oldest girl, and Alita was the second girl, and my youngest daughter, or sister rather, was Ruby. And I had a brother, Ottie, that passed away when he was 13-year-old. Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about your parents and what they did?
Yes, my parents was, to my knowledge, was very good parents. My father was, we always said, a jack of all trades. He done carpenter work. He done a lot of carpenter work and mechanic work. Worked on car engines, and he was a taxidermist as well. That means he mounted animals. I guess you know what the taxidermist is. And my mother was the housekeeper sort of thing, and she done washing for a living, you know, part of a living. That's how she bought her first washing machine, and washing for the public and things like that. And we also, as a family, worked out picking berries and things like that back those days.
Do you remember when people got all their food locally?
Oh yes, yeah. Most everybody around, especially in the country, get their food local at the local grocery store, and we'd get to town maybe 2 or 3 times a year with the old Model A car.
What was your house like?
Well, the one in St. John, which I lived in St. John until I was 7-year-old, my father built a new house there before I was born, and back in the late 20s. And then he had a workshop, a 2-story workshop. And back then we had running water and the so-called modern things in our house down there. Yeah, and it was just modern for those day and age, yeah.
How many rooms were there?
There was 4 bedrooms, kitchen, dining room, and pantry them days, which, yeah.
How many bathrooms were there?
1.
Did you have electricity in your house?
Yes, there was electricity in the first house, yes.
Did you have telephones?
No, didn't have a telephone.
How has lifestyle changed from when you were a child?
Oh my, that's a big question. It has really changed a lot, yeah, in a lot of different ways. For instance, families was closer then, I think, than they are now, and discipline was different than it is now. And there's a lot of changes in a lot of different ways that we could go on here for a long time on that one.
How different were things when you were my age?
You're what age now?
I'm 14.
14. And what difference between when I was young and your age? Schooling was much different. Back when I was young, and when we went to school, we was taught to say good morning, Miss or Mrs. or whoever the teacher might be, and you took your cap off when you walked into the school, and it was quite a lot different than it is now in school-wise, and things like that, yes.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in grade 1 in Colebrook, outside of 3 miles outside of St. John, grade 1. And then from then my father had bad health and he had to move to the country, drier air. So we moved to the country, and then I went from then on in the country until grade 6, and then I went back to St. John for grade 7. And that's as far as I got in school. And there's a story behind that.
Would you like to tell us the story?
Well, yeah, I don't mind. I lost my mom and dad when I was 12-year-old, and I went to work that winter as 12-year-old, and I went to the lumber woods and yarding logs with a horse, and then I would get my books from school and do my schoolwork in the evenings, and then my neighbors would take it back to school, and come June, then I'd write in the papers and so on. And that's the way I worked away at it until I got into grade 7. And people that my mom and dad knew well, I was boarding at their place, and all they had was what we called the family allowance back then for pay. And then I'd done chores around to kind of look after my keep sort of thing. And I had patches on my pants. So I was called into the principal's office and said, Monday morning, on a Friday, and Monday morning, don't you come to school with patches on your pants? I only had one pair of pants. So I said, well, I haven't got any other pants. Well, you better get some, because you're not coming into the school dressed like that. There's a big difference, isn't there? Anyway, I had to go back on a Monday morning, and no, he said, you got to go home. You can't come with patches on the pants. So then they had authorities back then, they called it truant officers and whatnot. They come to the house and said, well, you got to go to school. Well, the principal wouldn't let me go to school. Well, we'll have to put you in reform school then. Boys' jail, in my way of thinking, So I said, well, it wasn't my fault, so I left the city and come to the country. I wasn't going to go to jail, so that's the story behind why I was denied an education, in plain words, eh? So things like that I don't mind telling you, because hopefully that'll make you feel that you're quite fortunate alongside of others. And yeah, that's about the story behind that. And that's as far as I got to see in grade 7. In fact, I would have graded, but I didn't grade out because I had to leave and come to the country to pick berries that summer, and when the others were, and on. Yeah.
How did you get to school?
We walked to school in those days, everybody.
How old were you when you got your first job?
12-year-old.
Okay. What do young people do to have fun? Were there social activities and sports?
Well, in those days, we more or less had to make our own fun. We played games outside, and probably the girls inside, and things like that. We maybe would whittle out a baseball bat and use that for a bat, and my father would make us homemade skis for skiing and things in that line, and skating, and we kind of created our own entertainment sort of thing. And there wasn't much going on for the kids some days. You had to do it on your own pretty much.
What was your favorite thing to do for fun?
Pardon?
What was your favorite thing to do for fun?
Well, depending on the age, but when I was real young, I used to go with my father fishing and things, trout fishing and things like that, and picking up beer bottles to make a little money, and all sorts of little things like that, I guess, would be about the best way to say that. Yeah.
Did you have any pets?
Yes, I had a dog when I was real young, named Lucky. but he wasn't so lucky. But in the end, but and there was pets around those cats. Generally had a cat in the house. Yeah.
What was Christmas like back when you were young?
Well, Christmas when we was young was when you went to bed Christmas Eve. There was no tree in the house, nothing. And after we went to bed, they'd bring the tree in and trim it and put the presents all under the tree for Santa Claus and others. All the presents would be under the tree. So when you come downstairs in the morning, the tree was all trimmed and presents out there. And Santa Claus maybe would bite a chocolate or something in that line, and they'd put some treats out for Santa Claus and things like that. Yeah.
Do you have any funny stories that happened to you while you were growing up?
Oh, good many. I don't know any outstanding things that, when it comes funny, I remember when I'd be about 7-year-old going down to the wharf swimming, and I couldn't swim. I don't know, about 7-year-old, yeah. And fellows that went to school with me said, "You're going swimming." I said, "I don't dare go. I'll go around the wharf and go in." "No, you're going in over the wharf." So one got me by the hands and the other one by the feet, and they threw me in. I learned to swim fast. Yeah, and things like that. There's all in fun, all, and that's how we amused ourselves, I guess, like playing tricks on each other. And
how many different places have you lived during your life?
Have I lived?
Yeah.
Places or houses or
places?
Places. Start out with St. John and come to this part of down towards Big Cove and Plainwards. And I lived up above the Narrows while I went to school. And before that, it was down below Cambridge, where 12-year-old, where I went to work in the lumber woods for that winter at my uncle's place. And I lived in Fanjoy's Point, that's over here in New Brunswick, and lived in Fredericton late years, but that's not too many years ago. It is now 20 years ago when I retired. And I guess I've never lived out of the province, I guess, at any particular time. Only sometimes working out of the province. I'd be out of the province, but not living, I'd be home back here sort of thing, yeah.
What was your profession and how did you choose it?
That's another big story. I've worked at an awful lot of different jobs. Back in my time, nobody had a special job. You went to work with whatever job come up sort of thing, and you worked there till that job was finished, and then you went looking for another job. And I started out with, in the woods, I mentioned before, yarding logs with a horse. And then after that, I got a job in St. John when I was about 13, delivering groceries on foot for $12 a week. And I paid $8 a week board and $1.35 a week bus fare. So you can do your math and figure out what I had left.
Yeah.
I'd save up what little I had left and take my youngest sister to the show once in a while, because my bus fare was a weekly pass, and I could travel back and forth all I liked on the bus to do things like that. So that was my big job there, making big money. And after that, I come to the country and in the summer pick berries and things like that, and work for farmers and odd jobs. And then got in later after I got married. I got a job when they built a municipal building. That was the first high school down here. And I worked there at labor work until the carpenter work come along, and then I had my father's tools, and they told me to bring my tools Monday morning, and they put me on carpenter work. I started out with 85 cents an hour, and when I went to carpenter work, I got $1.25 an hour. That was big money back then. And I went from that, and I worked for a neighbor down here, Gordon Carpenter, at electrical and plumbing. And he taught me a lot about electrical, and I carried on and worked at that quite a lot. And I worked for insurance companies as inspector, and I've done, I guess, a little of everything. I worked at lightning rods, installing lightning rods. I drove tractor trailer, had my own truck. I've done a lot of carpenter work, built a lot of places around. And the last years, I worked in bridge work and survey work. A lot of places maybe I've even missed. But then I went for radio communications the last 8 years. I worked at tower work and installing radios and ambulances and police cars and things like that. And climbing towers, replacing antennas and dishes and all that sort of thing. And then I retired at 65, and since that I've worked harder than I did when I worked. So now I just work for my neighbors and trying to help my neighbors out and things like that to get the time in. And,
Did you ever get married?
Yes, I got married when I was 20-year-old. Yeah.
What was her name?
Dorothy June. And she was a Fanjoy, so she didn't even get her name changed.
Did you ever have any kids?
Yes, we had two boys, Douglas and Harold. And we was unfortunate enough we lost them both. And the oldest boy got killed on a kite flying behind the car in the wintertime, which was designed for flying over the water. And he made the bad mistake in flying it over the ice, and the harness broke. Yeah. And the youngest boy died out, he was in Vancouver. And I guess we'll have to say he committed suicide. So we lost both of them. Yeah.
Did you have any hobbies?
Oh yes, quite a few. Growing up, I used to snare rabbits and things when I was a young fellow, but that wasn't really a hobby. That was to make some money too. 25 cents a pair, they called it. And like I mentioned before, you had to create your own fun and and games and sort of thing. I used to like to take the 22 and go out hunting and stuff and fishing and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Have you ever won any special awards or prizes?
Not at all. I've got a few trophies. I get trophies for water skiing, skeet shooting, and rifle shooting, and a few things like that. But nothing outstanding, I guess. Just the ordinary guy.
Was there a special person who had a big influence on you, like a teacher or a relative or someone?
No, I had the odd teacher that was, sort of special in my books, but I wouldn't say outstanding. I think Gordon Carpenter was one I looked up to more than anybody after I grew up, because he had quite a few talents that I was interested in and things like that. So I kind of looked up to him to be one of the fellows to follow, sort of speak. I think he'd be probably the main one. Others there's a good many others that I looked up to and respected and all that, but no, I'd say he'd probably be the main one. Yeah.
Have you ever met any famous people?
Well, I don't know whether you call them famous or not. I've met an awful lot of people in my time. I used to generally hang around with some with the RCMP and the high school principal here years ago and things like that, you know. I generally hung around with other people as well, because I always felt that everybody's equal, you know. Some might have a better job than others, but everybody's equal in my books. And so I hung around with kind of a very assortment of people, you know. Yeah.
What was your favorite sport when you were younger?
Sport?
Or today, what was your favorite sport?
Well, I don't know. I liked a lot of them. I've done a lot of water skiing. I liked that pretty much. And I liked target shooting, and there's quite a few, but probably I took the water skiing probably a little more serious than the other sports. But I had quite a few that I took everything as they come along, I guess, for sports. Hockey, I was into hockey quite well. We won the Grand Lake Industrial League one time, Cambridge here did, and I was playing that year. And we played in Minto, Chipman, and all around, and Sussex and St. John. We played, you know, all around. Played against the RCMP and Industrial League, you know. Yeah. So, I had a lot of different things that I was interested in sports, but they'd be the main ones. You know. Yeah, they'd be.
Were you ever in like any big competitions for water skiing?
Yeah. I was in a competition in St. John, and I won a trophy there in Lily Lake. And they called me a veteran back then. I'd have to think back. That's a good many years ago. But I was on television there and had won a trophy there for the best slalom skier. Yeah, but I guess it was not too outstanding. But yeah, I did win a few things like that and other trophies I mentioned. But other than that, I just went along with the flow. Yeah.
When is your birthday?
12th of June, 1931.
Okay. So, when you were younger, and what your life was like, has it had an impact on on how you help out kids and older people today?
Oh, I think it does, yes. Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned that a bit. That's why I enjoy being here, hoping that it'll help you out in your growing up and whatnot. And another thing I'd like to make very clear, I don't expect to mention these things and you follow anything that I mention. You know, I would like to see you give it a little thought. Going back to what I said, just think about it a little. And if you feel, no, I don't believe him, or I don't see it his way, or whatever it might be, that's fine. Just give it a little thought, and then I hope it'll turn out. My gosh, I think he's probably right on that, or maybe you'll think I'm wrong. But that's give it a thought before you do anything or say anything that, you know, in your way of growing up and getting along in the world and so on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yet I think it's a big thing to give it a little thought before you say or do anything. Yeah.
So what are some of your interests today in helping out people?
Much the same as it's been all through life. I enjoy helping. That's where I get my fun. I enjoy working. I guess I workaholic, but there's where I get my enjoyment, working, and where other people get their enjoyment with something else. So I still don't think there's anything wrong with having that for enjoyment, because well, you're generally doing good for somebody, and I enjoy doing it. Yeah. I remember years ago I'd work all week in St. John, and back then you didn't drive back and forth, you boarded down there while you was working, and I'd come up on the weekends, and one gentleman in particular would be rimming, but yeah, he'd be haying or something. I'd work all weekend helping him hay. I didn't ask for money, but I enjoyed doing it, giving him a hand, And I'd done that ever since I was a young fella, and I enjoy doing it. It's fun for me. A lot of people, oh, thank you, thank you. Boy, I'm happy because I done something I wanted to do, and I do the same yet. I try to help people out. Of course, naturally, I have people help me out too that I really appreciate in different ways. In fact, there's a lady right there is one. She does a lot of things for me and she knows that if she needs something, her and Schultz, if they need something, I'll be there to do it. And that's the way we work and as neighbors, and I find it works out very well all the way around. And especially if you enjoy it, well, I think it's a good way to go, but like I say, give it a thought. See what you think about that. And yeah, any other thing you'd like to understand about that sort of thing, or?
No, you pretty much told me right there.
Yeah?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense now. Think about it.
And another thing I'd like to add too, that I always had a lot of faith in young people. And somebody, well, he's a bad young fella, or she's a bad girl, she's this and that. They're always good for a second chance or a third or fourth chance. Don't condemn somebody for the first time. In fact, I'd say, I hear people saying, oh, so-and-so, they're bad, they're this, they're that. I got to speak to them as I find them. And always give them another chance. Say, well, anybody can make a mistake. Mm-hmm. But as long as they'll own up to it, fine with me, I'll give you another chance. And I think that works out good too. And it makes better relationships between young and old and all around. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for coming and doing this interview with us. Well,
I'm very glad to be here. And thank you for, you've done a wonderful job, I think.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're a very good lad for that sort of thing, and I appreciate you asking me to come in. And hopefully, if in the future, if I can help you with anything, don't be afraid to ask. It don't have to stop here.
Okay.
So I'm always there for the young people. I always have been, and thanks again for allowing me to come in.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
In conclusion, would you mind telling me some of the interests and things you do for fun today?
Some I mentioned. I cut quite a lot of firewood. I don't give it away, all of it away, but I give some away. And I don't do it for money, but I do it because I enjoy it. Yeah. I enjoy being out in the woods and that type of thing I really enjoy. And other than that, I like helping neighbors out, no matter who it is. And I always would help somebody that I didn't like too well either. But I always had the feeling that no matter if I disliked them or not, if they was in need, I'd help them. Maybe I wouldn't want them to darken my door, but I'd still help them if they was in trouble. Yeah. And I go along with, I like, now that I got a little time, not much, but I try to learn to play some music. And as a young fellow, I used to play the harmonica some, and we'd have our house parties back then, and we'd all get together and everybody'd have some little instrument to play, and or sing. I wasn't much in the singing, only I always had a deep voice. I'd come in on the bottom end sometimes. But and another belief I have is for young people, I like to see them get into music because it's a very soothing thing, music. If you're a little nerved up about something, if you pick up a guitar or something, play a little music, maybe sing a song or something that you like, it'll soothe you down, it'll calm you down. And while you're doing that, you're not out doing something else that's going to harm your health or harm your whatever. It's so much better than other things that young people can get into. I'll mention nothing, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And I'm sure in the long run that for a hobby is much better for young people than some things they're doing right now. Yeah. And not condemning anybody for what they're doing either, mind you, because that's the way they went and that's their business. but I think the other would be a better way to go. Yeah, that's what I like to tell young people. Yeah.
Do you enjoy fishing, or do you do much fishing?
Not so much now. I try to get it once a year. I always buy my license, and I try to get it once a year. But I don't agree with the laws they have, because five possession and all this. If you go on a boat trip for overnight or for 2 or 3 days, and you come back, and you might catch some each day, but you're only allowed 5 possession, and that to me is a kind of a silly law. Yeah. It used to be 21 plus 1 at one time. I don't know how they got the plus 1, but back then you could go out and, you'd have a feed of trout, eh? You go out in a day now, 5 trout, and if you're a family, what good is 5 trout? It's so no, I don't go along with a lot of their regulations at all. And not that I go out and break a whole lot of them, but I just don't think they're right.
Yeah.
And that takes away the sport for young people, things like that, you see. To mine, if they leave it reasonable, because they're not doing the thing about what's causing all the shortage on fish and game, because the clear cutting is causing our deer to disappear and our trout, because the water in the streams, and they don't do a thing about that.
No.
They let the big companies come in and clear cut, don't do a thing. But they're on our backs about trying to do something about it, which is the wrong way to go, in my way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of things I don't agree with. The way that we're facing, that nothing we can seem to do about it. But and that, again, that takes away your love for sports, you see, which is wrong in my books. And then you go into something else, which is maybe not so good in some cases,
So where do you live today?
On the Fowler Road.
Okay.
Yeah. Mobile home on the Fowler Road. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, June and I owns the property out there, 160 acres, and the house where June lives, and it's still in both of our names and everything, but she can sleep better in one place and I can in another, so we're all happy with it, with the situation. And again, we're still awful good friends, and and we're still, in a way, a married couple, but still we got our own way of thinking, and I can go in there and sit down and saw on the old fiddle a little bit when I want something to do. I have 2 violins, 2 fiddles, 2 mandolins, piano, accordion, guitar. Had 2, and then I give one away that fell heir to my youngest sister's instruments, and she was very musical, and I fell heir to them. And I got 7 or 8 harmonicas, and so if I want to do a little something to entertain myself, well, I got it all there. Yeah, so I find that, very soothing, and I try to encourage that for young people, because I had noticed growing up that people that was musical got in less trouble than other people. I sensed that for years. And in most cases, I'm not trying to brag myself up or anything, because I'm not very musical, but in most cases they're very intelligent people. That my father played the violin, or the fiddle we call it, and he built his own. Yeah, couldn't afford to buy one, so he built his own, and he used to play for dances, country dances, square dances and things like that. And so I know music played a big part in the way he lived and the way he thought. It keeps you calm down and gets your mind set on something else. Yeah.
Could you tell me about how it was growing up?
Well, I think we went through some of that as we went along, but I do notice things now, and it takes me back to when I was growing up. I think to answer that question would be, I find that when we was younger growing up that we was taught to have a lot of respect for the elders and things in that line, that's much different. I'm not saying that you haven't got respect for your elders, and I'm not saying that at all, but I do find that, I'll give you a little example. We was taught to open the door to let the lady in first and things like that, walk on the outside of the sidewalk, and which I notice is much different now. Like I mentioned before, you always said good morning to Miss or Mrs. to the school teacher, whoever it might be, and mostly all ladies back then. Now there's a lot of men teachers, but and things I noticed that they're different now. And I'm not saying that you young people haven't got respect or anything like that, but there is a big difference, and it's the way that things is now. It's the way you're living in the surrounding you're living in is what makes you do the things you do, act the way you do, and say the things you do, and so on. And I've got a firm belief that I always said that young people, if they happen to get in any mischief nowadays, they're just the same as I was, same as anybody there. They're just as good as we was. To the young guys that gets in mischief, the young ladies that gets in mischief, there's nothing wrong with them. Not a thing. It's the way they're brought up, because they're not made to mind like we was. That's my way of thinking, mind you. And the children now is really lovely children. Don't matter if they do get in a little trouble, because they don't punish them for anything. You see, we wasn't beat or punished bad, but you'd take some of your privileges away if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, and for your punishment. And nowadays, I find that, well, I'll give you another little example in that line. I used to be deputy sheriff, or go with the sheriff to take criminals from one place to another, sort of thing, eh? And when we'd take them over the hill to Dorchester, the young people, oh, there's home, yeah. Well, I wonder if so-and-so there. Boy, he's a good cook. Yeah, we'll have a good weekend now. And they had better food than they got at home, and more recreation. And I couldn't see how that would be punishment, you see. So it all leads back to when they get out, they're going to do the same thing all over again, because they wasn't punished for the first time. So that's the big difference in the way things was when I was growing up and the way they are now. Some of the big differences, and that leads right on to most everything. It leads on to your education and leads on to everything. And I'm not here for glory for myself. I'm here I'd like to be able to help young people's way of thinking for their benefit, not for my benefit, because it's not going to help me no matter what you do. It's not going to harm me, it's not going to help me. But if I can help you young people, I'd sure like to do it. Yeah, and that is the big difference in when I grew up and when you're growing up. I feel that older people now should do little things much different toward young people than they're doing. And I think the proof is in the pudding, sort of thing. It's right there. People say, how did you come up with that? Well, you don't have to be too intelligent to come up with it, because it's right there in front of you. All you got to do is just a little bit of thinking and say, oh yeah, that's right too. Another thing I think now, there's too much of people getting their mouth in gear before they get their brain in gear. They start talking before they think what they're saying and think what they're going to do. They think about today and not enough about tomorrow. If people would think a little more about the outcome of what they're doing than just of what they are doing, I think it would be a lot better for them and their neighbors and for the whole world. Just think about the outcome of what you're doing, like years from now, sort of thing. Not just today and tomorrow, but how the outcome of this is going to be in 5 years' time, or when your children comes along, or about the future. Yeah, I find that there's too much of this. Yeah, well, we'll do this, without saying, yeah, but if we do this, what's the outcome? Sort of in that line. And I'm pretty sure I'm right in that way of thinking, because it's already come to pass so many things in that line, and that's what I'd like to pass along to younger people. Yeah, to make a big difference, not to put you back and make you live the way I was brought up. It's not that, but your way of thinking. It'll help you out in your way of thinking, that we had to do it on our own, sort of thing, eh? So I didn't have anybody to bring me up. I had to more or less do it on my own, eh? So I had to look at this guy and this person to see what they done, and if I thought it was a good way to go, that's where I got my education. Yeah.